I call to order this regular meeting of the Board of Public Works this Tuesday, December 6th of 2022. First up on our agenda, we have messages from board members. Do we have any messages from the board this evening? No messages from the board. Next up is petitions and remonstrances. If we have anyone who is here to make a public comment about something not on the agenda, now is the opportunity to do so. If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a comment, you can use the raised hand function, or you can type in the chat, and we will unmute. Any public comment not on the agenda? I see a
chat from Greg Alexander. Greg, do you want to make a comment?
I think so. I think if you unmute, we can.
Thanks. Yeah, my name's Greg Alexander. Sorry, the app upgraded. Took me a while to figure it out. I just wanted to ask if it's possible to get a report on whether or not there have been any tickets written or notice of violation for scooters parked illegally. Thanks.
Thank you. Is that anything City Legal has information on right now?
I am not aware of any tickets that have been issued. It's possible I wouldn't be aware of them. It's more likely that I would be aware of them, so I don't think there have been any.
Okay. All right. Well, at our next meeting, we could put that on the list for staff reports to just get an update on that. All right. Any other public comment on anything not on the agenda this evening?
I don't see any additional chats or raised hands.
All right. Thank you. Next up is the consent agenda. Under the consent agenda is the approval of minutes for November 22nd, 2022, the 2023 service agreement with Cummins, Inc. for maintenance and repair of generators, outdoor lighting service agreements with Duke Energy for West 12th through West 15th Streets, outdoor lighting service agreement with Duke Energy for dead end of East Woodstock Place, 2023 Parker Technology LLC service agreement for video, audio, communication, and monitoring, 2023 Evans Time service agreement for support and maintenance of parks equipment, that's PARCS, Resolution 2022-87, Declaration of Surplus from ITS, Resolution 2022-88, Declaration of Surplus from Sanitation, and approval of payroll. Do we have any items that need to be removed from the consent agenda this evening? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on anything within the consent agenda? Again, if you're on Zoom, you can use the chat function or raised hand.
I'm not entirely certain if Greg has raised his hand again or if this is from previous.
Yeah.
Greg, do you have a comment?
Sorry, thank you. My name's Greg Alexander. Yeah, every year Freeze Fest, they close, I guess it's called Maker Way, and then at the west end of their closure, they just park cars in the crosswalk. And every year I report it, and honestly, the parking staff usually does a good job of enforcement. I thank you. But if that could be like proactively taken care of this year and Freeze Fest wouldn't block the sidewalk, that would just be so awesome. And the sidewalk I'm talking about is actually a sidewalk on Rogers Street, which is not supposed to be affected by this, as far as I know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And we do have an updated agenda, and so Freeze Fest is not on tonight's agenda any longer, but we will record that comment for when that comes forward to the board at a future date. All right, any other public comment? Is there another one?
I don't see any additional comments or raised hands.
Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda for tonight's meeting, December 6th, 2022.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next up under new business is Resolution 2022-90, temporary moratorium on the consideration of special event applications.
Thank you, board members. I forgot to identify myself earlier. Michael Rooker, City Attorney for the city. On November 18th, 2022, in an ongoing case involving Bloomington, the Federal District Court for the Southern District of Indiana issued an order directing the city to promulgate protocols involving the installation of private art in the public right-of-way. The court ordered the city to adopt those protocols by January 2nd, 2022. In an effort to comply with that order, staff from multiple departments have been working on a policy, and we had originally hoped to have that policy ready for the board's consideration tonight. Unfortunately, we're still working on it, and so we don't have it quite ready for the board to consider. You will have noted that the original agenda had included the policy as an item on the agenda, but it's not there any longer. We do anticipate bringing a policy to the board at the board's regularly scheduled December 20th meeting. That's the last meeting before that January 2nd deadline that was ordered by the court. However, in the interim, in the past, we've seen private individuals and groups utilize the special event application process as a way to request the installation of private art in the right-of-way. Because the city is in the process of revising the protocols that govern the installation of private art in the public right-of-way, and the protocols are uncertain at this moment, both for the public and the board, we are requesting as an interim measure that the board place a moratorium on consideration of special event permit applications until such time as a policy is adopted. Again, we anticipate the policy would be adopted on December 20th, and we further anticipate that at the December 20th meeting, after the policy is adopted, this board could consider any pending applications for special events in that same meeting. And so we're asking you to please approve Resolution 22-90, which accomplishes that moratorium.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item? Any public comment on this item? Oh, sorry, it's not on. She'll turn it on just a second.
Testing? There you go. So following up on Mr. Alexander's question about Freeze Fest, the inference I drew from the fact that Freeze Fest was not a part of the consent agenda, and given the current item on the temporary moratorium, was that Freeze Fest is exactly the kind of special event application to install private art in the public right-of-way, and that's why it's not on. And I was just hoping to get confirmation of that fact. Thanks.
Because this moratorium affects all special event applications, Freeze Fest is a special event application, so it's my assumption that that, first off, is why it was removed from the consent agenda. I think that it does include art. That art could be subject to that review as well, once we know what the policy is going to include.
Just to confirm that as well, I think we would want to make sure, given that the policy is in flux right now, and we do have a pending special event application that does involve something that might be captured by the policy, we just want to make sure that all of the rules are clear, everything is updated, so that this board and the public and applicants and everybody knows what the rules are for special events that involve the installation of art. I do think that the public commenter is correct. That could potentially impact the special event that he referenced.
Any other public comments on this item?
There are no chats or raised hands.
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve Resolution 2022-90, the temporary moratorium on the consideration of special event applications.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Next up is Memorandum of Understanding between Duke Energy and Parks and Recreation for the Reliability Project.
Good evening, Board. My name is Tim Street. I'm the Operations Director for Bloomington Parks. I apologize that I could not be there in person tonight. I'm a little more disconnected than usual. For this agenda item, I'm representing several different city departments that have worked together with Duke along this project. And staff recommends approval of an MOU with Duke Energy for the upcoming phase of the Duke Reliability Project, Phase 2, that will connect the transmission lines between the substation on Rogers, across from Switchyard Park, to the substation at 11th and Fairview. This project has been in the works in negotiation between the city and Duke Energy for a number of years, as I gather. And Duke is now preparing to execute this phase of projects to improve electric reliability in the city of Bloomington. As part of their project, it will necessitate the removal of about 126 public street trees, for which the city has negotiated compensation to replant trees as much as possible in the same or similar areas as where they will be removed. I was able to confirm with Duke Energy that all private property owners affected along the route have already been contacted about trees there. Duke will also additionally be issuing a press release shortly to describe the impacts of this project and the timeline of that coming up. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Okay. Any public comment on this item?
No comment on Zoom.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the memorandum of understanding between Duke Energy and Parks and Recreation for the Reliability Project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is contract with E&B Paving LLC for the Maxwell Lane Traffic Calming Project.
Good evening, Sarah Gomez with the Engineering Department. The project of Maxwell Lane Traffic Calming, will construct traffic calming devices along East Maxwell Lane from Henderson Street to Woodlawn Avenue. Traffic calming devices include but are not limited to speed humps, pavement markings, and signs. This traffic calming project was prioritized through the city's resident-led process of the Traffic Calming and Greenways program. The project will be funded by line 60107070000 Maintenance of traffic and road closure. The construction is scheduled for 2023 to last 30 days with completion by August 8th, 2023. Most work will be completed with short duration mobile operations. Quotes were received at a Board of Public Works work session on Monday, December 5th, 2022. The board received the following two quotes: E&B Paving LLC, $36,900. Milestone Contractors, $98,851. E&B Paving LLC was the apparent lowest responsive and responsible quoter. We request that the board approve the contract for the Maxwell Lane Traffic Calming Project with E&B Paving.
Thank you. Questions on this item? Any public comment on this item?
Dave Assens with the B-Square Bulletin. The amount of the bids is pretty dramatically different, and I was wondering if there's, sometimes contractors will say, well, we'll bid on it, but we don't really want to do the job, but heck, if we get selected, we might as well make a lot of money. I don't know, or sometimes the contractor doesn't understand the scope of the project and doesn't bid appropriately. Do we have any theories as to why there's this giant disparity in this particular case? Thanks.
Thank you. So I'll ask staff about that. Do you have any insights in the differences between the bid?
Sure. I would say that the public commenter was correct in both of his ideas about why those numbers were so different. I'll also add that E&B Paving recently did a traffic calming project that's similar in scope and size to this project, and the bid came in approximately, within 5 to 10,000, I think it was. So it's a similar amount of money, and it's what we were kind of expecting to see, whereas the other bid was quite a bit higher, 3 times.
Any other public comment on this item?
I raised hand on Zoom. Betty, if you would like to make your comment, you're welcome to do so.
Hello, my name is Betty Rosenagel, and I live on Park Avenue, 1 block north of Maxwell. I use it a lot. I walk along it. I cross it to get to the park. I also cross it not only at my block park, but also at Stull and Fess, sometimes Henderson. I'm curious about a couple of things. One is there have been bids made, but was there a more specific description of what the work would involve? What I heard presented sounded kind of catch-all. It will consist of X, but not necessarily all of them, but some of them in terms of what kind of traffic calming. The reason I ask is some neighbors have been told that there are going to be 4 speed tables or humps in the space of 4 blocks. And that seems excessive. So is that what's happening, 4 speed humps? That's one question. And the other is that, is there a reason for not putting a stop sign somewhere in between Woodlawn and Henderson? That's not a very long distance. But if there is a reason, is it that the traffic gurus claim people don't stop at stop signs? That to a layperson, that sounds contrary to what you would expect. And I think I've figured out what that means, that people don't stop at stop signs. I think it means people don't stop in the way that a driving test examiner would accept. That is to say, a full stop, no forward momentum at all. I think I would have to agree that most people don't do that. The people who slow down and then go through include, I suppose, virtually all bicyclists, because it's much easier to do that than to come to a full stop and start again. So that my theory is that it doesn't mean that people don't stop. It means that people don't completely stop. But it seems to me, as a walker and a driver, and observing how cycles behave, that stop signs do a really good job of slowing traffic down. Admittedly, that's not their stated purpose, but they do a really good job of it. In my own personal experience, not so much with speed tables or humps. I think you may remember that initially there were speed bumps or speed bump strips put on Covenanter and some other places in town, and that the emergency services drivers complained that driving an ambulance or a fire truck over that was not a good idea. Hence, they were removed, and tables or humps or whatever you call them were put in place. Yes, my objection is or my comment, negative comment, I suppose, is based on a lack of understanding about whether there will in fact be 4 humps, or maybe 1, or 2. Thank you. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have staff who might want to address the question of the design of this project and question about the stop sign?
Good evening, Neil Copper with the engineering department. So to address the question about the design, so first when the quotes were put out, there was sorry, can you hear me? When the quotes were put out, there was a very explicit plan set included in those quotes. So the contractors were bidding on very specific items. It was not just a general description that was read here tonight. There are 4 speed humps planned for that stretch. It's a 4-block long section from Woodlawn to Henderson. It's basically 1 speed hump per block. We did actually evaluate whether we could do less speed humps within that section and still have effective traffic calming. Unfortunately, with the spacing of the intersections and the desire to slow down traffic before they cross through those intersections, before they cross the marked crosswalks in the area, we felt that 4 would be the most feasible alternative that we looked at. Regarding stop signs instead of speed humps, so stop signs do a good job of slowing people down at one point location. They do not slow people down throughout a corridor. There are actually studies showing that if you put stop signs, at regular intervals on a street, that drivers can actually speed up in between stop signs, trying to make up lost time. So by having kind of more continuous traffic calming through a corridor, you can get a more regular and lower speed as opposed to having stop signs where you have high speeds in between them and low speeds right at the stop sign. So if you really wanted to try to slow people down at all of the intersections in between, you'd have to put a stop sign at every single intersection. I don't think I would say that people don't stop at stop signs, but I would say that people tend to lose respect for stop signs that don't meet certain guidelines. So if you go through a stop sign every day and you never see any cross traffic and you never see any reason that you would need to stop, then you start rolling through the stop sign. Some people start ignoring it altogether because you don't see any reason why that stop sign is there. As opposed to a stop sign that is higher volume and you are often waiting for somebody, you know you have to stop there. You know there are conflicts that you're paying attention to. So we certainly did take those things into consideration in the project, but we don't think that stop signs were the best approach here. I think I covered at least most of it. Do you think anything else I should cover?
Yeah, I think that covers the initial comment or questions, and there's probably some board questions about this project. Any questions from the board after hearing some of this information?
I just have a question. I know that council has taken up adding a stop sign at Maxwell and Sheridan, which is farther east. This end of Maxwell is kind of the west end. How will the slowdown at that east end, or west end, I'm sorry, of Maxwell Lane impact the project at Maxwell and Sheridan, if at all?
Yeah, it shouldn't impact it at all. There were actually in the discussions of this project, discussions about both areas were happening at the same time. They're far enough separated and they're separated by other always stop signs that the two don't affect each other.
And so on the wording on the staff report, because it does cover many different types of calming, is that simply intended to offer some context around what traffic calming projects look like, whereas this one really has been designed, or at least the preliminary specifications have been shared with the bidders? Do you anticipate there being any changes to the specifications or the design going forward? And what would that look like if there is a process for that?
I'll just quickly attend to the staff report question because I'm the one who wrote the staff report, and that's just typical language that was copied. I'll make sure in the future that I'll include more specific information if it's a smaller project like this about how many speed humps and things of that nature. As far as any changes in those plans, I wouldn't think that would happen at this point unless there's some sort of conflict that comes up during the project. If Neil has any other comments on that, no. So that's, if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any other public comments on this item?
No comments on Zoom.
Is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the contract with E&B Paving LLC for the Maxwell Lane traffic calming project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next is request from AEG for lane and sidewalk closure.
Jason Kerr with Engineering, coming forth with 2 areas for AEG. They're requesting lane closures and sidewalk closures, multiple areas within their project areas, which in this grouping of 2 sustain there's a East 16th Street and South Grant Street. This is part of the citywide fiber project, as we brought forward before. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Questions from the board on this?
Not as to this specifically, but as we keep getting these every couple weeks, I'm just curious if you're having any feedback from the public about the process or how it's affecting them.
I've heard multiple things. We've had a couple issues, which usually are dealt with within a day or 2. I'm in constant contact daily with project managers from the AEG side dealing with these. We've had actually some good words about the crews are very cordial with everybody they come in contact with. Not really having any projects or problems that really stick out in my mind that haven't been dealt with in a quick response with AEG. They've been really, really good in working with us. But like I said, you'll have problems within projects, but nothing that really steps out that has taken more than a day or 2 to correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment on this item?
I have no raised hands or chat on Zoom.
Do we have a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the request from AEG for lane and sidewalk closures.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is contract with CE Solutions for visual structural assessment of Morton and Walnut Street garages.
Good evening. Ryan Daly, Parking Services Division. This is a contract with CE Solutions as part of our long-term goal of assuring our parking garages longevity. The Parking Services will be performing an annual inspection of all current parking garages for Morton and Walnut. This inspection will be performed by CE Solutions. They'll be providing a visual analysis of structural condition of each garage and recommend any repairs. This assessment is not a replacement of a full inspection, rather a preventative measure to prevent further degradation and expensive repairs. They're going to provide all related engineering services and inspection of repairs and a report for that. This cost is at $7,500, and this comes out of building repair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this item?
I know we asked you at the work session about the general schedule of how we review the garages in terms of this, which is just a visual inspection, and then the more in-depth inspections. And I was wondering if you would mind just doing a quick recap of what the year to year, what we can expect in terms of inspections for the garages.
Certainly. Generally, what you want to do in parking structures is you want to inspect them every 7 to 10 years, depending on the type of structure. Ours are port-in-place structures, so these are longer-term garages. So we look at it. We had our most recent in-depth inspection in 2017, and we'll be looking to do that 7 to 10 years after that. So we're coming up on that date for a full inspection. That's hammer sounding of all of our columns, chain dragging to listen for any degradation of the concrete, checking for spalling in the concrete overhead. And what we're doing now is just a walkthrough as part of a longer-term plan. Every year, we're bringing an engineering service so we can walk the garages and just look for anything that we can fix before we have to fix it 5 years from now. And that will save a lot of money, long-term. And they will also be providing other type of recommendations as, oh, you should do some surface coating here, or we should put a coat over here, just some preventative measure type items that we can look for every year.
So this contract is for visual assessments of Morton and Walnut. Are there visual assessments of the trades garage and the 4th Street garage planned as well?
In about 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
So that doesn't start when the garages are
Yeah,
fairly new?
the 2 garages are virtually brand new, so we wouldn't need to take a look at anything for a significant period of time.
Okay, thank you.
And I realize this item is probably not within the scope of the visual structural assessment, but I was curious how the elevator is doing in the Morton Street garage.
It's doing very well now.
Okay.
It's doing very well.
All right.
We had a big problem there. That's been taken care of.
Okay, so things are
Things are running smoothly so
right
far.
now. Okay, all right. That sounds good. Any public comment on this item?
There are no comments on Zoom.
Is there a motion from the board?
I move that we approve the contract with CE Solutions for visual structural assessment of Morton and Walnut Street garages.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is 2023 service agreement with Ancris LLC for maintenance and repair services at City Hall facilities.
J.D. Borf, Public Works. This is basically a renewal of an existing agreement we have with Ancris, and it actually covers all of our Public Works facilities. Includes general carpentry work, drywall repairs, fence repairs, minor concrete repairs, just general contracting type of repairs. I forgot what the not to exceed number for next year is? Yeah, and the request for next year is $75,000. That doesn't mean we'll spend that, that's the not to exceed number on the contract.
Any questions from the board?
Just to note that I need to recuse myself from this item and the next one because Ann Chris has done work on my personal home. Thanks.
Thank you. Any public comment on this item?
I see no comment on Zoom.
Is there a motion on this item?
I move that we approve the 2023 service agreement with Ancris LLC for maintenance and repair services at City Hall facilities.
And I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 2 to 1 recusal. Next up is contract with Ancris LLC for the renovation of Fire Station Number 4.
Yes, the Fire Department and Public Works staff has determined that Fire Station 4 is in significant need of upgrades and repairs. We retained Tabor Bruce Architects to document these and provide specifications and bid documents. The project was advertised twice publicly and left open for 4.5 weeks. We had a mandatory pre-quote meeting on November 21st, 2022. We had 2 contractors that attended the meeting, Ancris LLC and Strasser Construction. The quotes were received as sealed quotes by the Public Works Department on December 5th, which you opened last night at the work session. And if you'll notice, the actual what we call the revised quote amounts are different than the base quote amounts that were announced last night. Our reasoning for arriving at those revised numbers is documented, listed. There's some, one contractor would include a price in his base quote that the other contractor listed as an optional price and vice versa. And when we arrived at an equivalent scope of work and material specifications, the revised quotes turned out to be $269,472 for Ancris and $289,400 for Strasser Construction. And we're requesting a 10% contingency to be on top of the contract amount. So we're requesting a contract of $296,419 to be awarded to Ancris LLC. And if you have any questions about the scope of repairs or the type of repairs or anything like that, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you. Questions from the board on this? I'm curious on the content of the bid. Did both the bidders have these options for adjustments to their pricing? And so both of them addressed them very specifically, like would say NA on an item versus enter a price.
On the kitchen cabinets, one contractor bid them as laminate cabinets. The other contractor bid them as maple cabinets with an $8,000 deduction for laminate cabinets. So we adjusted his price down $8,000 to get an equivalent product. The one contractor included the removal and replacement of the concrete apron on the west side of the building and paving in his base bid, and the other did not include that in their base bid. So when we added those back in, it adjusted that quoted price. And I asked one contractor about it, and it had to do with the way his bonding worked on his bid bond. He said it was easier for him to include everything and deduct things back out than it was, because if we added things back in, he would have to go back and increase his bond amount. So he included all the optional stuff in his base quote, and then we deducted those back out, and the other contractor didn't include a lot of those items in their base quote.
So in the case of Strausser's bid, the additional items were listed specifically under those costs.
Yes.
But in Ancris, their bid, those additional items, the cost for the concrete apron, the cost for the wood lockers, and the cost for insulation were included in the bid price? Okay. But that was also indicated clearly on the bid so that everybody knows that's part of the scope.
And the scope of work that he's provided, along with optional additions, deductions, and exclusions, they were pretty specific about what they included and didn't include.
Okay.
And this is kind of an unusual project. It's a wide-ranging scope of repairs, from landscaping to concrete to lighting replacements, electrical panel replacements, painting, masonry repairs. I mean, it's quite a lot of moving parts in this one. So it would have been difficult for the contractors to bid everything identically when their bids came, the way they bid them.
I'm just intrigued by the fact that, like, Ancris's base quote and Strausser's full total, their original, Ancris's original base quote and Strausser's total quote with the additions included are very close, right?
Yes, and then if you take the deductions away from Ancris's, it lowers his quote by $20,000.
Right, okay.
Yeah, like the $12,000 listed, there was an optional specification for the concrete installation. We had to determine exactly what we wanted to do. The revised specification included removing 12 inches of subgrade, replacing that and then compacting it. And the optional spec didn't include disturbing the subgrade, using the existing subgrade and putting the drive back on top of that. Strausser included that removal, or not removing the subgrade, as his base bid. And Ancris included removing that 12 inches of subgrade in their base bid and deducted $12,000 back out for not removing that subgrade. So to get to the equivalent specification, we had to deduct $12,000 out of Ancris's bid.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, we tried our best. We sat down with the architect and to get apples to apples, where we had, arrived at the same scope of work and the same material specifications to come up with equivalent prices.
Any other questions from the board? Any public comment on this item?
No comments on Zoom.
Okay. Is there and your recusal still stands, correct? Okay. Is there a motion from the board?
I move that we approve the contract with Ann Chris LLC for the renovation of Fire Station 4.
And I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes with 2 and 1 recusal.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next up is staff reports and other business.
I just want to mention that typically we would cancel our last meeting of the year, but that is not going to happen. We do have some agenda items that we will have to present. So I just wanted to say that we will proceed with that meeting. And that is it.
Next up is approval of claims. Any questions from the board on claims? Okay. Any public comment on claims?
I see no comments on Zoom.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve claims in the amount of $836,244.18.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And if there's nothing else, then I will call for adjournment.